Are you someone who doesn't really have a voice in your own life, who sort of feels like you're avoiding rejection or judgment whenever possible, or maybe you just really end up in relationships where you absolutely lose a sense of self? If that's you, this video is definitely for you, because the problem is with these things, they are pervasive in all kinds of areas of our life. This avoidance of judgment, this people-pleasing feeling, and a lot of it comes from your subconscious programming. So today, I want to dive all the way into what that looks like in real life, what those causes are, and what you can actually do to change it. For those of you who are new here, I'm Ketra Thompson, and I help tender-hearted men and women who are constantly betraying themselves learn how to create secure, healthy, fulfilling love in their life. And I do this through my subconscious solution programs and my confident connection method. So if you'd like to learn more, there are links in the description below where you can check all that out, and you can set up a complimentary consultation call so that you and I can talk and get to the heart of what's going on, and I can give you my best recommendation. So what do we call this behavior when it shows up in life? Sometimes we call it people-pleasing. Sometimes we call it self-betrayal. Sometimes we refer to it as being a doormat or really enabling someone to stay stuck. It's enabling behavior. But first, I want to look at where it comes from so that you can have some clarity about what this is that's going on inside of you, and then we can hop into what you can do about it. Now, a lot of these issues get programmed into us in our childhood. And so there's a combination of our early life experiences in childhood and the later in life experiences that sort of reinforce what those early beliefs are. So the parental expectations of a child. If that parent really feels like they are constantly calling that kid to a higher level, that child might feel like they have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops. They can't be loved unless they accomplish X, Y, or Z or behave in a certain way, and that can create a need to be a people pleaser so that you can just simply be accepted and loved even by your own parent. Now, there's also the factor that sometimes when we're young, we don't have the emotional support that we need. And so this means these households aren't necessarily consistent when we're growing up. And we might create these people-pleasing tendencies so that we can try to create consistency. If we're consistently good, then we'll consistently get that love and affection that we're so badly wanting from our caregiver, because we don't know how to survive without them when we're little. We really need their protection and care, and so it can feel like a life or death thing. Now, all of this can create low self-worth. Now, if we have low self-esteem or low self-worth, then we're going to great lengths to avoid conflict and to avoid rejection. And so if someone as a child was made to feel like they aren't worthy, or their beliefs they internalized were about that, this can create the dynamic, and it can also happen later in life as well. And so having this fear of rejection and abandonment drives this low self-worth, and we overextend ourselves, or we just suppress our own needs in order to keep the relationships in our life intact. The other thing that can cause this is trauma or unresolved pain. So complex trauma is sort of this ongoing repetitive thing that can happen in our lives, and we don't really know it's happening, but the repetition of it sinks those things into our brain and affects our subconscious beliefs. So ongoing criticism or ongoing withholding of affection or any kind of emotional abuse, physical abuse, or neglect can really develop the people-pleasing mentality in someone. And so if it gets really toxic, then you've got the other layers of maybe you grew up with or were married to someone who was gaslighting or manipulative with you, where being in a relationship with boundaries did not work for you to keep this person's affection. And so your emotions and your needs and your desires were constantly dismissed because they were sort of steamrolling everything, kind of running the show, calling all the shots with no ability to accept influence or hold space for your feelings. Now, another reason this can be cultivated, and I personally experienced this, is cultural and societal pressures, but especially inside groups. So if you're in some kind of religion that really calls you to maintain harmony within that group, then you're going to conform to their rules, their standards, their ways of thinking, and you're going to betray your own ideals and your own thoughts because mentally you're seeing theirs as a higher standard, a better place to be, and you start judging yourself and putting your opinions and thoughts and feelings in a lower position. And so this continual process actually creates more self-betrayal because you're putting a groupthink mentality above your own individual feelings and you're betraying your own needs. And so this can also play out just societally as we're told what to be as women or men or, what our family tells us to do. And also gender roles can play a big part in this where, well, in order to be loved or have love, I have to be like XYZ. In order to be seen as a good man, I have to do A, B, and C. In order to be, a good woman or wife, I have to do these other things. These beliefs are really fed into us in a repetitious way. So over time, they keep coming at us and we start to conform ourselves to these beliefs, but at the same time, we are betraying our own inner voice. And probably the biggest influence for us socially is this learned behavior because we are watching it happen. We're watching a parent or family member behave in this way to manage the people around them so that they feel safe. And so we watch them people please, and we watch them enable, and we watch them betray themselves, and then we internalize those behaviors and believe that we need to do that to also keep the peace and to keep love in our life. This all creates a fear of conflict. And the fear of conflict really equates disagreements with the possibility of rejection. And it creates all this tension between trying to decide if you're going to step into a place where someone might disagree with you because you might be rejected if you do. And so it creates this dynamic where you're always rejecting your own needs and wants in order to try to keep yourself from the external rejection. This also can create a people-pleasing mentality. So you can see as I'm listing all this stuff that this is sort of a snowball effect. These behaviors affect you in multiple areas of your life because perfectionism is the result of thinking that you have to show up in a specific way in order to be accepted, loved, praised, validated, and so you act like you need to get everything just right all the time. You're really hard on yourself, and this is because you want to have this perfectionistic image that the world sees of you so that you avoid their criticism and their judgment, so you don't get ostracized from the group. And all of that people-pleasing actually creates this need for validation and approval seeking from people outside of yourself. And when that happens, you tend to really lack boundaries in your own life. You don't want to implement those boundaries because they might create someone's rejection of you. And so it actually paralyzes you, keeping you in a place where you cannot speak up because the cost of it feels like it's so huge. So actually understanding these people-pleasing tendencies and all the little parts to them, how they play out, is actually the first step toward learning how to prioritize yourself, how to step into your assertiveness, how to create balance in your life and self-awareness so that you can set boundaries and you can actually have really incredible relationships with the other people in your life once you not only have the awareness, but once you've been able to reframe those belief systems. So we do this in so many ways. I watched my own mother do this over and over and over. She would want to do something or have a goal or focus, but either her husband or us kids or whatever would ask something of her, and she would agree and go along with what was being asked of her, but there was this resentment that built. And it was like, oh, I guess, but I was going to do X, Y, Z. And I remember having a conversation when my kids were little. I think I'd asked her to watch one of the kids, and she said, well, I was going to do, woodworking or whatever it was, but yeah, I guess I can watch him. And I said, Mom, It's okay for your yes to be yes and your no to be no. If it doesn't work for you, you can say no, but you don't have to go through this long list of like playing the martyr of, well, I'll put off this and I'll put off that and I'll do X, Y, Z, and then I'll watch your kid. You don't have to do that. You're allowed to have a voice and you're allowed to say these things. And I don't think it resonated with her very much at the time. I think it surprised her that I said it, but that way of thinking just did not apply in her brain. She was raised in a home with a very alcoholic father. She was always managing other people's emotions, always walking on eggshells, making sure everything was okay so that she felt okay. And then she continued to do that in the rest of her relationships in her life. And it led to a lot of self-betrayal and a lot of resentment where she just didn't get to do the things that brought her joy because she didn't know how to manage her yeses and nos and be assertive, mostly because she didn't know how to tune into herself and actually get a real answer. So it's not just about the implementation of saying it, it's about being tuned into yourself enough so that you have some awareness about what your capacity actually is. Your capacity isn't how many hours you have left in the day. Your capacity is based on, how much energy you have, how much you've already done, how drained you might have been from that day, how much you have coming up the next day that maybe you need to take some time to prepare for or rest for. It's not taking into account all these things when you're just looking at, well, I've got this much time in the day. Yeah, I guess I can do it. It's not about whether you can do it. It's about whether you have the bandwidth to say yes to something. Now, your subconscious mind is really what's driving all this. It's programmed. It's basically a blank slate. From the time you're born till you're about 7 years old, you're programming your subconscious mind. And you don't have any discernment during that time. You don't understand why sometimes your needs aren't met. You're just creating beliefs about whatever you're experiencing. And then you go throughout life and other things happen. Maybe you end up in a toxic relationship or something, and it actually contributes to cementing in those old subconscious beliefs that might be, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. And so it creates actual evidence for the old belief that got programmed when you were little, that you weren't worthy. You've now moved into your adult life, creating more evidence to that fact. And so here are some things that you can do. Now, with my clients, I take them through this subconscious process so they can actually reframe this on a subconscious level so they're not battling against it all the time with their willpower. So we reframe those things and we create a very custom path to creating the life that you want. But if you want to take some action steps today, this is what I would recommend. 1, I want you to notice where you're feeling resentful. This is a huge indication. This is where you're staying silent in your life, where you're not saying what you want, where you're not doing what you want. The resentment is growing. And so notice where the resentment is and even start writing it down, because sometimes it becomes kind of just the norm. We're used to it. We've always thought that way or felt that way. So we really need to start paying attention if we're going to get the clarity about where that resentment is living. Now, step 2 is to start sharing your desires and preferences with others. Even if they don't do what you want them to do, start saying what you want. Start saying what restaurant you'd like to go to, what sounds good to you. And you can be fine with not going there, but just you saying it is going to create a dynamic that allows you to prove to your brain that you have a voice and that you can use it and that it doesn't mean the end of the world if you do. And the biggest part of this is dealing with those subconscious triggers. So when those subconscious triggers of fear or anxiety are coming up in you, thinking that you have to do these things that you're obligated to do, you really need to start getting awareness around those and making note of them, because the subconscious triggers are your biggest issue. And that is the biggest thing that I focus on with my clients so that we can deal with that subconscious trigger and eliminate it so you're no longer battling against it every day. So the goal is really to step into your authenticity. Your authenticity is who you are and who you were before the world told you who to be, before you got programmed. The free-spirited, fully open, loving, connected, authentic person. And you couple that with mature things like boundaries and discernment and understanding that you don't have when you're younger. And then you create an absolute dynamic that cannot be stopped in any capacity. Because when you have the freedom to be yourself and not care what the world thinks of you, and you have the wisdom and discernment so that you can implement the boundaries you need, this is when you stop self-betraying. This is when you stop the people pleasing and you stop shrinking yourself down and you actually step into what you want in your life, the connections that you want. Because most of the time, this stuff plays out in our closest relationships. And that's where we want to feel that connection. We want to be fully seen, fully known, fully understood, and fully loved for who we really are, not the mask that we've been taught to wear. And this process that I do with my clients is exactly what gets people to that point of being able to accept themselves so that they can step into their authenticity. So if this has resonated with you, I would really appreciate it if you would click like and subscribe so you can be notified every time I post a new video. And if you'd like to learn more or have that consultation call, check out that link in the description below. I'd love to chat with you. So until next time, I hope you curate a life by your own design.